Okay. All right, everyone. Today we're going to do the demo for time. If you downloaded the sample data, what you will probably notice, once I get it pulled over, is that there are a few files in here. I've already created the folder. That's why all this other stuff is here. There's a file with public schools that we've seen before. There's a US border file that's just for visualization. There is this one netcdf file in here. Despite being called netcdf, they're usually one way that they come often is .nc. And then there's this US historical states. These are the main files that we're going to be working with today. So we're going to start off by looking at how we deal with time and temporal data for vector data to start, and then we'll look at the raster data with the netcdf and do some things with videos and all that kind of fun stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is bring in the US historical states layer. So I'm going to go into a catalog tab over here, go in through my folders, and I'm just going to bring in US historical states. So like we talked about before, the best way to deal with these sorts of temporal data in a GIS program is to have the repeated features instead of repeated fields. That lets us have different geometries, different geographies, things like that for each one of the layers. And sure enough, if you look at the attribute table, you'll notice that there are multiple Alabamas, multiple Alaskas, territories, states, all sorts of different things in there. And in fact, if we use our query tool to just hit one, you'll see that there's many, many, many features that are all overlaying the same one. So what that means is it's a mess until we do something to actually enable time on it. So if you open up the attribute table in here, you'll see that you have a start date for each one and an end date for each one. And then the description, citations, all of these other sorts of things. So what we need to do, first off, is just tell the software that these are the times that we want to use, the start and end. And we can do that in here if we right-click and go to Properties, or just double-click on the layer. Let's quickly double-click on the layer. Okay, so we go down to the Time tab. And then there's this ability to show only show the layer when certain times are met, but then there's also this filter one right here. And this is the part we want to actually be looking at. So we're going to filter layer content based on attribute values. And here is where we're going to set some things in here. So it's asking us the layer time. Each layer, or each feature has a single time field, start date. Well, in this case, we actually have a start and end. That's what we want to use. We'll use the other one in a little bit. So it's smart enough to realize that the start date is called start date or start time. The end time is called end date. And then it's going to calculate sort of the beginning and end here. So 2015 is just when this layer was last updated. There hasn't been a lot of changes to the US border after 2015. You could hit calculate if it wasn't clear. You could change this so that it's the last time something major changes, which is the 50s. If it's a live feed, you can do other things, but we're not going to deal with that. The time interval can be kind of an interesting thing to do. I'm going to leave it as the default for now. I'm going to specify as 1 year for now, just because that lets us jump through on 1 year. Otherwise, it can be kind of slow. So I'm going to do the view using a regular time interval rather than 10 seconds. Let's go ahead and do 1 year and hit OK. So you'll see that it looks like almost nothing has happened at first. But if I take this thing up here and start dragging it around, what it's actually doing is it's showing me all of the stuff that falls within there. What I actually want to be doing is less of that and more of sort of dragging it in. And then I do have, if I hit it, the ability to just sort of look at 1 year as we go. Should be playing it as a slow little video here. You can see some things changing as states move around, borders change, territories come in. You can start to build out like that. There's some settings that we can do here as well. There should be a little clock icon on the left here. We can get in there. So we can hit that to do that, to kind of jump it back, turn it off and on. Up at the time tab here, we have all sorts of different settings that we can do. There's this thing called time snapping that'll let it jump to the most recent one. There's a number of steps, our step interval, we've already set that. This is just if we had multiple time layers in there. We can do starts and finishes and things like that. Our span, in this case, it might be useful to have our span be 1 year as well. That sort of matches with what's in the layer. That makes it so that we don't have this like dragging it. It defaults out to 1 year for us, which is what we actually are trying to do. So there's all sorts of things on here that we can deal with. Time zones could be important if you had more specific things. There's all sorts of different stuff we can do. Other things we can do that might be useful is we can export these things as a layer as well, or sorry, as a video, just like we were or will when we do the 3D data. This is again in the view tab up here. And then there's this add animation. There's a timeline button down in the animation thing. We can just say create first if we want to, but we can also come up elsewhere to get to it. So just bringing that up if it doesn't come up. If you want to, what you can do first is if you're trying to record the video of the whole thing and you've got it on 1 year interval, you would just start at the beginning, create a time frame or a keyframe, and then move it to the end. And like I said, things don't really change after. We'll do 65. Gonna add another one on there. You can add an overlay on here too if you want to. If you wanted to do map time, it'll do it like that. There's ways we could change all of this if we needed to. Make it a little bit less like that. And then if we want to play our video, we can do that. You can see that it sort of goes all the way across. I think that is way too quick. So it might be useful to change the duration up here. So the duration is currently 3 seconds. So if we wanted to go, we could crank that up to 30. Okay, so I did something wrong in there. So playback controls. There you go. For some reason, it just took it a second to update. It looks like it's not rendering great as it kind of jumps around things, but it's actually doing a fairly decent job, I would assume. And then we can just do our export. So just like we have when we've done other sorts of videos, we can go over to the export movie icon, which is this thing right here. I'm gonna switch mine. The other one I did it on a different version and it didn't really work great. So I'm gonna do an MP3, MPEG-4, MP4. I'm gonna drop my frames per second down to like 20 or something, just because last time it took a really long time. And I'm gonna export. And it'll kind of run in the background for a little bit as it's building this all together. Okay, having our time enabled up here does mean we can actually start to do some of these interval or videos and things like that to pull out also. So if we wanted to begin working with those, just like they were before, they're in the View tab. There is this Add Video thing here. That'll create our keyframe animation thing down here. All we really need to do is create one of these at the beginning and one of them at the end. That's totally fine. We would just create a first keyframe with it dragged all the way to the start, and then the last keyframe dragged it to the end, and then do everything. Just so you're aware as well, there is also this like import right here that would allow us to just import the time slider steps. That might be a slightly faster way to do it. So it's going to pull in all of the time slider steps here. It gives us a duration in this case of really long, 12 minutes. I don't think we want that. Why don't we crank that on down to 30 seconds? And then just take a look to see what that looks like on the playback. That's probably what we want. Things jumping up and coming back around. Those are just rendering things that are happening as it kind of comes along like that. It's walking its way along on a sort of 1 year to 1 year. Actually, it seems like for some reason the time layer is not on 1 year anymore. So I'll go adjust that. I don't quite know what happened. But that's the beginning of being able to have our video ready to render. Yeah, for some reason it seems to be dynamic. So I'm going to span it out to just, I just really want it to be 1 year. Okay. So when it comes time to export, if you remember how we do that with our videos, we would come onto the to the animation tab up here, export movie. Current animation is what we would want to do. These are all things we could save stuff if we wanted to. There's a preview we could do. There's a, we could have that up to be able to preview kind of what it's going to look like. It's just taking it a minute. But ultimately, when we press this, it comes up over here. Mine was already up. Definitely want to roll down the frames per second just so it goes a little faster. Also want to just make sure that we have these total frames in a reasonable amount. Want to make it sure it's 30 seconds long. You could really try to reduce the file size if you wanted to. These are going to take a while to export. It does seem like that's just the way it is with these new ones. So they're going to take a little bit. You could do an animated GIF as well. That might actually be a little bit faster. Try that. I'm just going to close this and come back into it. For some reason, it was not working for me. So whenever you're exporting these things, just expect that it's going to take a little bit of time. Otherwise, other things you can do if you wanted to is you can have overlays on here as well. So there are these like additional things. So in this case, the map time might be kind of useful to have. Basically, what that's doing is it's giving me this property of start time and end time. You can have it be short, long, whatever. It looks like this. This is all text that's pulling it out of the actual metadata for the file. Oops, didn't mean to go enter. You could enter, you could put other things in as well. So if you just, wanted to do something different, you can escape out of that and it's going to show up here. Oops, it doesn't actually move from the map. It's just sort of where it is. But it's telling you that it's, what the time period, what the time frame that it's working on is. So once you get your video exported, you should be good to go there. Other things that we can do, though, I'm going to create a new map document here just because there's the rest of the data we're going to look at is just Indiana. It's not super big. So I'm just going to come up into Insert, New Map. Watch out that because I had done my 3D stuff most recently, that was the default. Just make sure you choose like the actual new map so you don't end up with a 3D viewer because that's going to be harder to work with time. And then the other one that we might want to look at is just a little bit different. It's these Indiana Public Schools. This is a data we've seen. This is a layer we've seen before. And if you open up the attribute table, you probably notice that it has the year that they're built. However, if we sort those, there's a lot of zeros in there. There's a lot of things where they just didn't know or didn't get recorded in the database. If you want to work with those, the best thing to start off with is just to remove them so we don't end up with a year of 0. This is a case where that definition query that we've talked about that'll filter things before they come in would be good. And we want to select the field year built And we would want to do probably is greater than 0. You could also do not equals to 0, all those sorts of things, but this is just one that would work for us. So now only the ones that the year is greater than 0 are going to show up, and you see that there's some 1800s in there. So having done that, we want to enable time for this one. Again, it's in the properties. Rather than this one, we're going to come down to time. We are going to filter based off of it. Each one does have a single time field. It's year built. It looks like this. It goes from 1800 to 2009. You could calculate it if you wanted to. The difference on this one, though, is what we do want them to do is we want them to stay up. We don't want them to just like disappear afterwards. So we want to make sure that that is incorporated in here somehow. We probably want to do our year step again as well. Regular time interval step is 1 year. And the way that they've set this now to do this is you have the ability to kind of do both. So what we're going to work with, we're going to hit OK. And when that time slider comes on for this one, we just want to make sure that it's always starting at 0 at the origin, and then we're sort of moving this part around. So when we hit play, we want to make sure that it's actually just building them up and leaving the old ones on. You can see that kind of happening in the background there. If it's still moving, there's just not a lot in apparently the 1600s. I'm not quite sure why the year back there is. I think it's just that gapped it out to that point. But you can start to see some pop up here and there. You can start to see some things start popping up as you get further along. So eventually we'll start getting more things in there. And what I was saying before about, yeah, there we go. Most of them start popping up in the 1900s. What I was saying before about animations as well, and being able to just do the keyframe at the beginning and the keyframe at the end, that is something you can do here. So I went into view again, I'm adding an animation. If I create my first keyframe as somewhere back here, and then I create my last keyframe all the way at the end, the software is actually smart enough to fill in that gap there. So I'm going to switch my duration up to be, we'll say 12 seconds. It should auto change the current as well. Now when I go to export my movie, if it's going to allow me to, I'm going to do a quick little GIF with 20 frames per second. It'll take it a little bit to do those 241 things, but once it gets going, it'll actually go pretty reasonably quickly and be able to get through them. So you see it's stepping through them right now. It says it's going to take another minute or two. Okay, I did not, time did not go completely super fast there. I paused the video for a minute. It is finished and successfully did the rendering on it. So that's what that would look like. Okay, the last type of 3D or time stuff that we want to do is those raster files. So I'm going to, again, just insert a new map document just because this one's also a little bit different. And then if you remember from before, when I went in and did add data here, I could see, I'm in wrong one. I could see the precipitation netcdf, but I actually don't want to use that. In fact, if I choose that, if I try to go into it, it's just going to give me an error. So it can see it, but it's not actually something that we can really work with. What we want to do instead is create a link to it, and there's a tool to do that. So if we wanted to, we would go in here and do make netcdf. So we're actually looking for make netcdf raster layer. And sure enough, we're going to input that same file, which is this precipitation monthly. It's going to ask us about a variable. Let's look at it for a second and figure it all out. It's not actually looking for the latitude here. What it's actually looking for is precipitation. And once we fix that, it successfully gets the dimensions for latitude and longitude just fine. We'll call it precipitation layer. That's fine. Everything else we can just sort of leave as is. We'll set the time somewhere else. And what we get is a worldwide temperature or precipitation layer where high precipitation is in red, low precipitation is in blue. And then these are just the values across that grid cell for a particular time period. So one other thing I gave y'all that I think is probably worth putting in, if you go back to add data, is I gave you just the US border. Just gives you a visual cue for where you are. And I'm just going to click on that and take it a black outline. Okay, so far we have one layer, just probably the most recent one, the top one in this whole giant stack of things. But we can, within that layer, turn on time. So if we go into time, in this case, it's filter layer content based on attribute values. Layer has a dimension. That dimension is time. We happen to know that these are monthly, so we can do a predefined time interval if we want to. I'm going to put mine to be 1 month and then hit OK. And now, sure enough, we have our time slider back up here. It's going to jump us around as we go. So I did the wrong thing. We want to make sure that our time window and everything else are on 1 month. We can hit play and sort of watch what that looks like as it goes across the different months for 1989 right now, as far as precipitation goes. So I want to show you one other part of this, and that's that we can also have in vector data at the same time. Multiple layers, same time, no problem, as long as they're both time aware. So we're going to choose US fires, bring that in. And this is all of the forest fires that have happened in the US for a time period that's not quite as extensive as the one for the precipitation data. If you look at the attribute table, you can see that we have a good amount of stuff. We have fire IDs, fire names. We have a start date over here as well. That's the one we're going to work with. So we go into US fires, go to time, same sort of thing. We're going to filter. This one has a start date, doesn't actually have an end date, so we're not going to worry about that. And it is probably good to set a time interval here of, 1 month, because in this case, we don't want these things to flash up and disappear if we don't happen to catch them on that particular date. So we want to make sure that they kind of average out to 1 month. Hit OK. And this is what I was saying before, is that now when we start running, you can see the fires popping up at the same time. They're taking care of where they need to be. And you can probably start to see that these things tend to happen in time periods when there's less precipitation. And as we did before, you could set all of the things on here where it's sort of pulling things in. Time snapping might be a good one here where we're looking at individual months. These are just not coming. It's not changing because it's already rendered it. So if I do it again, should have more things coming in. There you go. So that's about it for time data. I wanted y'all to see how you load different things in, how you can work with different types of data, with start dates, end dates, raster data, vector data. So for there, as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and otherwise,